Welcome to the Main Allure podcast with your host, Laura. Welcome to the official first episode of the Main Allure podcast. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to have main allure energy. And essentially, it means having a magnetic aura. By definition, it means naturally attracting people and creating a positive and comfortable atmosphere for others. Think back to a time where you were at an event or some type of, conference, meeting, and you notice that there's someone in the room who, for whatever reason, you just feel very attracted to them. And that doesn't necessarily mean romantically. It means that you feel comfortable around them, you feel calm and at ease. And that is essentially what having a magnetic aura is giving off such a positive energy that others feel like they can just be themselves around you. I mean, have you ever been in a public place, perhaps at a park or even on a train, right? And for some reason, there's this person that's sitting next to you and they're not really doing anything to make you, feel more vulnerable per se. But for some reason, you are so comfortable with telling them your life story, telling them personal details about yourself. You realize, wait a minute, why am I telling you all of these things? Why am I being so drawn to this person? And that's what it is. It is that they have this magnetic aura that allows you to feel comfortable enough to express yourself and to be yourself. I think one of the celebrities that embodies this is Rihanna. She could be anywhere. And for some reason, people they glow every time they're around her. She's always making them feel at ease. She's always allows them the space to be themselves. And people tend to gravitate towards people like that because it is essentially a human need to feel seen and to feel heard. Magnetic people also tend to be more compassionate and empathetic towards others. And someone that and I think that we all miss, and if you don't know who this is, I definitely recommend that you research her and find out about her life. But it is Princess Diana or Lady Diana. She was someone who was always willing to be there for others, listen to others. It didn't matter that she was doing something that would go against the royal rules, right? Like she always broke protocols in order to show that she was human and she wanted people to feel seen and heard. She was often criticized for doing these things. I remember there was a time when she was in New York City, and this was back in the 90s, obviously, but she was in New York City and it was during the height of the AIDS epidemic. She knew that this was a big world crisis at this point, and she was there for some event, I believe, but for some reason she decided to make a pit stop at one of the hospitals that treated AIDS patients. Of course, paparazzi were following her around everywhere she went, so she was conscious enough to take that opportunity to go out and visit one of these hospitals so that she could bring awareness to what it means to have this disease and how we can help. Obviously, at the time, it had a huge stigma. She was aware of that. And for some reason, she didn't care. She was still willing to visit the hospital. And for someone like her, someone of her stature, it was extremely frowned upon by the public, or at least by her critics, right? Because she was absolutely loved by everyone. And the funny thing is that she still went out there. She embraced the AIDS patients. She hugged them. She, talked to them for a while. If you remember during those days, we were always told that, you can't touch someone who has AIDS, or you can't be near them because you're going to catch it yourself, and then whatever, right? But she wasn't afraid. She still felt like it was in her nature to go out there and show others that, hey, this is not an end all be all. These are humans who are going through a tough time and who are in need of human interaction even, right? Because I'm sure nobody was going to visit them or going to see them. But the funny thing is, after that, people became a little bit more susceptible to understanding what it meant to even have the disease. And that type of awareness is how she became absolutely loved. She always cared for the vulnerable, for the people who were hurting. And she didn't care that she was this super famous, often the most photographed woman in the world. She still put herself out there and showed her compassion. And that's why people loved her. If Princess Diana were alive today, what do you think she would care about? What are the things that would call her attention and she would take a stand on. I would love to hear what you think. And if you can leave it in the comments, I would appreciate it and would love to read it. Magnetic people also tend to have this cheerful and positive energy. They exude joy. They're always uplifting others. And you can think of perhaps, the class clown or the life of the party. These are people that no matter where you go, this is kind of like their persona, if you can say. They're always excited to bring joy to others. And it's always a good sight to see. I think they're also not afraid to be a little corny. Sometimes we tend to try to be so put together that we forget that being human is also being a little corny, a little dorky, a little weird sometimes. And that is essentially what makes you, what makes you authentic. And having that magnetic aura allows you to become that. I mean, even Bad Bunny, he's essentially all of those things. He's not afraid to dress up. And, as a woman, he's not afraid to cry. He's not afraid to do a lot of things in front of his public because he's being himself. He's okay with you liking it or not. And because of that, we are even more intrigued by who he is. And, what is he going to do next? How is he going to show up next time? And that is the magic of having a magnetic aura, of being yourself and being authentic, because at the end of the day, you don't care what people think about you. You're just being you, and that is all that matters. Having that type of energy makes you powerful because essentially you don't have to pretend to be anyone else but you. You could be in a room with a bunch of CEOs or perhaps your high school friends, right? And it doesn't matter. You will be that same person. You'll be authentic. And that type of energy will transmit through because of that self-confidence, because that idea that you can be who you are without pretending, because you are just existing in the world without using a script, without feeling the need to perform for others. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of these traits require some form of self-confidence. And I know you're probably asking yourselves, well, how am I going to do that if I'm not confident in myself, if I'm not feeling my best self? And the trick is to take it one step at a time. Maybe there's something that you're almost afraid of doing, or maybe you're thinking about doing and you're like, well, I don't feel confident doing that, but just try it anyway. You have to be comfortable with understanding that people who get to that level oftentimes fail repeatedly. These are things that they don't necessarily talk about, but it's the truth. A lot of times people like this are comfortable with failing. And so you have to be comfortable with failing. You have to be comfortable with embracing imperfection, because trying is how you become a better self. So don't feel down at the fact that you're not there yet. All of this requires trial and error. And by you doing it more and more, you're going to feel that confidence come in. Essentially, it's a matter of you embracing your authenticity. And that's how you're going to attract that magnetic energy into you. And you're going to feel that within. And that's what you're going to transmit to the world once you start feeling comfortable with yourself and who you are. Look at me, for example, when I was... Well, if you knew me from way back when, you're probably asking yourself right now, what? Laura's doing a podcast? How so? You could barely get 3 words out of her. But again, it's a matter of failing, trying. And at this point in my life, I'm comfortable with doing things that are not necessarily what others would expect of me because, again, trial and error, don't care what people think of me. That's the end of it. Something else that magnetic people have is a strong presence. They command respect. They command attention. There are people who are just naturally born leaders who, no matter where you are, you just kind of always listen to what they have to say because it's usually something profound or something that just makes sense. Now, don't confuse this with being the loudest in the room because obviously there are people who can fake it, but being authentic, again, is the key here. They are humble in their approach. They are great listeners. They consider others' opinions. They are not about, I'm right and you're wrong, or you have to listen to me because I know more than you do. You know what I'm saying? There's that arrogance that is completely not there. They are just powerful without even trying. And if I could think of someone right now, I would say Barack Obama is one of those people who, no matter what, whether you like his politics or not, as a human being, you can say that he is pretty much an embodiment of what it means to have power without being abrasive or without trying. He knows exactly what to say to get your attention, and he has a way of using his words to communicate exactly what he wants to say without leaving confusion or doubt. It's almost as if you trust what he's saying, and I'm sure you could even think of a supervisor or a boss or even a friend who just has the same persona, who just embodies this sense of presence and commands attention, that you just feel like you are safe around them, that you can just listen to what they have to say, and you don't necessarily have to, put that one eyebrow up to figure out, well, like, should I trust this? Should I trust what they're saying? Oftentimes, they are not going to sit there and give you BS, right? They're going to be truthful and genuine with their words. Now let's talk about some traits that would be considered magnetic. I'm going to list 5 different traits and, just check on yourself and see how many of these you have. Number 1 is you are kind and empathetic. What that means is that you love to help people out. You're that person that people tend to call when they need help because they know that you're selfless in some way. At the same time, you're not the one who is always asking for praise or looking to be recognized for your actions. You just naturally do it because that's what comes out of your heart. And I think that's beautiful. If you feel that you're lacking in that department, then try some small things. Maybe you can open a door for someone. Maybe let someone go when they're trying to cut you off in traffic. I know it sounds horrible, right? Or you can even volunteer, find ways to help your community. And essentially, you will become used to strengthening this trait along the way, and it will make you feel that sense of peace within because you're helping others, and that's always a good feeling. Number 2 is having self-awareness. You tend to understand yourself very well. You know your values and your beliefs, your strengths. You know what is good for you and what isn't. You recognize behavior in others and whether that aligns with you or not. And the key here is that you tend to be relatable. You're someone who is easily approachable. You're not intimidating in some way. And intimidating, it's not a bad thing per se, but you're not someone who is self-absorbed to the point where people don't feel comfortable approaching you. If you want to strengthen this trait, you can always try to perhaps be considerate of others. If you're in a meeting and you're talking, understand that there are other people that perhaps want to talk. Or maybe there's someone in the room who is very quiet. Ask them, hey, what are your thoughts? What do you think about this topic? And you'll see that eventually you start to recognize your surroundings and understand when you should step in, when you shouldn't, allowing others a space to be themselves. The third one is always remaining positive. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to ignore when you're feeling crappy, right? When you're feeling sad, when you're not feeling your best self. It is essentially knowing when to regulate your emotions. And so you're not flying off the rails because something didn't go as planned. Take knowledge, you seek understanding as to why am I feeling this way, and not bringing that feeling onto others. They're also very realistic in their pursuits. They understand that they could have expectations of themselves, but they are not going to set these extremely high expectations. They're grounded in themselves and knowing that, okay, yes, I want to achieve this goal, but I am aware that it may go wrong, right? I'm aware that it could fail, and that's okay. I can always try again. And like I mentioned before, the way to strengthen this is to try. You could fail many times, try again. Obviously, at some point, you're going to have to decide whether this is the right direction, but don't be afraid to try and fail. Number 4 is being a good listener. I think that sometimes we get so excited with what is happening with our own lives that when we're having conversations with others, we don't necessarily stop and take stock to what is going on. So there are times when someone could potentially be going through a situation and they want to vent to you. And come on, that is not the right time to sit there and say, hey, well, what about me? Hey, let me tell you my story. It's always good to remind ourselves that we are in the listener position at that time. And that is essentially your role. I do this myself. I remind myself that I am the listener at that point. And so knowing that that is the role that I am playing while someone is venting to me and letting me know of their problems, it keeps me grounded in understanding that, hey, this situation is not about me. At some point, I can always mention what I wanted to say, but this is the time that that other person wants to feel heard and listened to. You can always offer advice and support in some other ways, but for the time being, when someone is venting, it's always best to just listen. And if you don't want to catch yourself in that that horrible pattern, a good way to make sure that you're listening is to ask follow-up questions. Maybe they're telling you something and you want to hear more and say, hey, what about this? Can you explain that to me a little better? Or how did you feel about this part or like this situation? And it will keep you on your toes to make sure that you're actually listening. And there are times where people could be telling you a story and for some reason you drift into some other thought because maybe you're going through your own situations. But making sure that you ask follow-up questions will keep you grounded and present. And number 5 is having a good sense of who you are. Maybe at some point you weren't sure about what you wanted to do with your life, but being certain that you're going to go down this life path and that embracing the possibilities is a good and inspiring way to follow your heart. I highly recommend it. Now, when we talk about traits that are considered not magnetic, they're usually traits that are pretty obvious. You don't necessarily have to look them up in a dictionary. They're just the way that they make you feel. And some of them are when people are abrasive, belittling, they put other people down, they're disrespectful, they make fun of people's vulnerabilities, they do not respect people's differences. These are all things that make others feel uncomfortable and almost like a repellent because it's not a good feeling, right? You don't like to be around people who could be potentially passive aggressive, who make snarky comments and expect you to just put up with it. You're not supposed to stand up for yourself. And these are all traits that are not alluring at all, are not necessarily magnetic. The reason why I decided to bring these up is because I want people to be more self-aware with the way that we're going about every day. I think we've come to a point in society where we're just naturally becoming more rude and disrespectful. Maybe it's the fact that in the internet, you just not necessarily standing in front of people. So it's so much easier to go on social media and complain about others instead of having conversations person to person or in front of one another. I encourage you that if you are having issues with someone or maybe you're having a disagreement, to talk about it. Do not sit around and go on the internet and make these, and we've all seen them, right? Like these indirect quotes and things like that where you're like, wait a minute, are they talking about me? But if you're that magnetic person, you're just going to let it fly and say, well, if they really care about it, they're going to come to me and talk about it, right? And with that, I think that we can all do better to be more present, be more genuine and compassionate towards others. This obviously includes myself. Just because I'm here yapping about this topic doesn't mean that it doesn't involve me, right? Like I also need to work on myself each and every day to be a better person. And I encourage you to do the same. Sometimes we get so caught up with our lives and all of the things that we have to deal with every day that we kind of forget that we're not alone in this world. We have to work with others. We have to communicate with other people. And our presence also has an effect on the way others feel. So let's try to be better people overall. And I encourage you to always be mindful of how you're communicating, how you're treating others. Sometimes that's all it takes to change that mindset of how magnetic you are, how you're being perceived by the world. It is how you treat someone, how compassionate and empathetic you are. And I hope that with this little message that I try to bring about in this episode, you'll start to understand that. I don't know that everyone really thinks about these things, and I hope that you do consistently. Think about how you can make someone's life better. You'd be surprised how many people are not seen, are taken for granted, are not being considered. And again, don't be afraid to show up for the people who care and appreciate you. That is all for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Main Allure podcast. Thank you for sticking with me in episode 1. I hope that you stick around and listen each and every week. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, bye.